hello everybody, and welcome back to the Mastering Risk Management podcast. I'm Anthony Wilson, and today we've got a very, very special guest. Now, I know I say that every time, but this is a bit of an exclusive. Should we call it a worldwide exclusive? We'll see where we go with that one. I know media outlets tend to use that with gay abandon, but we shall see whether this is a worldwide exclusive. We do have with me today as well Brett Palmer, one of the other partners of ABM Risk Partnership. So welcome, Brett.
Thank you, Anthony. Good to be back.
Just before we talk too much, I'm going to just read the bio of our very special guest, and that is Dr. Alan D. Thompson. Now, Alan is a world expert in artificial intelligence, specialising in the augmentation of human intelligence and advancing the evolution of integrated AI. Alan provides AI consulting and advisory to intergovernmental organisations, including member states of the United Nations, Non-Aligned Movement, European Union and the Commonwealth. Alan's applied AI research and visualisations are featured worldwide, with citations in the University of Oxford's debate on AI ethics in December 2021 and in the US government's Economic Research Report in February 2023. His 2021-2022 experiments with Lita AI and Aurora AI have been viewed over 2.5 million times. Prior to his work in AI, Alan was a major contributor to the Human Intelligence Research and Practice. As chairman for Mensa International's Gifted Families Committee, Alan served 2 consecutive terms, sharing best practice among 54 countries, and his work on gifted education was referred to in the Department of Education's High Potential Policy. Alan's best-selling book, Bright, was made available to the families at Elon Musk's Gifted School. A copy of the book will be sent to the moon aboard the Peregrine lunar lander in 2023. Alan continues to advise enterprise, government and international media in the fields of artificial intelligence and human intelligence, consulting to the award-winning series Decoding Genius for GE, Making Child Prodigies for ABC with the Australian Prime Minister, and 60 Minutes for Network 10/CBS, and Child Genius for Warner Brothers. Alan completed his Bachelor of Science, Computer Science, AI and Psychology at Edith Cowan University in 2004, studied gifted education at Flinders University 2017, became a Fellow of the Institute of Coaching affiliated with Harvard Medical School in 2017, and received his doctorate from Emerson 2021. Alan's dissertation was adapted into a book featuring Dr. Rupert Sheldrake, Connected Intuition and Resonance in Smart People. Now, Alan also produces a monthly subscription called The Memo, and many organisations around the world, thousands of them, rely on it. People like Accenture, Amazon, the Boston Consulting Group, Ericsson, Google, Harvard, IBM, Lockheed Martin, Microsoft, MIT, the Rand Corporation, Sony, Stanford University, Telstra, Tencent, Tesla, and Uber, to name a few of the thousands of subscribers to that Memo. So that's a very impressive resume. Alan, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Anthony. I was going to stop you there, mate. That's a long bio, but now I don't have to do any name dropping at all. We can actually just talk properly.
Absolutely.
Guys, we've run out of time, so thanks everybody for tuning in.
Well, you could see the artificial intelligence is of low presence in my brain. I struggled over a few words there, but hopefully we'll be able to edit those out. So, Alan, welcome to the program, and I guess the short description is you're a smart cookie. What got you into AI? Why AI when you could have been doing, I guess, anything that you chose? What was the attraction?
Yeah, I don't know if I consider myself a smart cookie compared to the kinds of people I got to work with starting about a decade ago, and I was embedded in human intelligence. So literally the prodigies, the very, very smart children and their families, how they got there, like the inputs, whether that's genetic or environmental, how they actually process that, avoiding mental illness and neurodevelopmental disorders, and then what the output was, how they actually displayed that talent, because it's all well and good to go and pass your exams, but what are they actually doing? What are the inventions? How are they pushing that out to the world? In May 2020, a particular piece of artificial intelligence came out that changed the world and changed my life, because I went, well, this thing's smarter than any prodigy I've ever worked with. That piece of technology was called GPT-3. It was the precursor of ChatGPT. and it essentially was not trained on doing anything. They just gave it a big whack of data. I'm talking about a terabyte of text data, and allowed it to make connections so it can do things like outperform us on the US SAT exams, or the latest version of it can even outperform us on wine tasting. It had made these connections that were just so absurd. So look, a prodigy specializes in one or two things. Current, what I call post-2020 AI, can specialize and does specialize in anything. So seeing that, I pivoted essentially to working with artificial intelligence and making this more visible for people.
That's fantastic. And Alan, just looking around your website and some of the articles you've written, and you've got several books as well, it seems to me you work in intelligence rather than just artificial intelligence, and you seem to be connecting the two, that human, computer link, as it were.
Yeah, that's right. That's the foundation. Artificial intelligence, like a lot of unfortunately named buzzwords or things we get through corporate speak, is not a really good indicator of what's happening. I've heard other people call it augmented intelligence or just expanding what's possible. And I think intelligence is the basis, but keep in mind that one of the triggers that brought me here was creating an article or a paper called The New Irrelevance of Intelligence. And what I meant by that was that human intelligence now, whether it's education or bringing ourselves up biologically to a particular level, is really irrelevant. And whatever we call this evolution means that we can be 1,000 times smarter as 1,000 times as smart as Einstein, as silly as that sounds, with the capabilities that we've been given from this augmentation.
Yeah, it's quite incredible. I actually read that paper in advance of our discussion, and was quite fascinated with the concepts, and some of the old principles still apply by the sounds of it. This adoption of technology by the early adopters, and then the fast followers, and then the masses. And you quote, the iPhone as an example of what did you call them? Life enhancers.
Right.
Yeah. So, what a great way to describe that. And, I'd commend listeners to have a read of that article. It's not a big read, but it's a great way to summarize how this change just keeps coming at us. And AI, or whatever its proper name is just another iteration of that. I mean, it will take some time for people to adopt. I noticed, Brett fell over on the floor when you mentioned that ChatGPT could do wine tasting better than him. I think they've revived him, and he's possibly back on his seat now.
I'm sure I enjoy it
more. So, Alan, maybe for the listeners, in a nutshell, what is AI? Can we explain it in simple terms? Is there a way of helping people understand this thing called AI a little bit more easily?
There'll be all sorts of formal and technical definitions. When I look at beyond human level intelligence, one of the buzzwords or buzz acronyms that you might hear is AGI, Artificial General Intelligence. I look at computing technology that performs anything at the level of an average human. And when I say anything, I mean digging ore out of the ground, passing our exams, having a conversation, displaying empathy. That is my human definition right now. And obviously there are more formal definitions, but we're at a level where we do have this human-like intelligent machinery, to quote Alan Turing's term for this back in the 1950s, intelligent machinery, where we're relying on a piece of silicon to get to our level. Back in 1950, that seemed impossible. In 2011, when IBM put Watson on Jeopardy, that seemed a little bit more approachable, but then everything changed once again in 2020 when we had this post-2020 AI called GPT-3 that allowed us to interact with intelligence that had essentially formed its own way of thinking. There was no pre-programming in it. It's not being given a task like, here's how to code. I'll tell you what color the sky is. It's blue. Go and look up this database. There's no database. It's conceptualizing. So that part is a real visible example of artificial intelligence.
Yeah, and when people talk artificial intelligence, I think they get a little confused because we hear about machine learning or natural language processing or algorithms or whatever else. Is artificial intelligence just a collective term for some of these techniques or tools, or is there more to it than that?
Yeah, no, it's an umbrella term for sure. And you'll hear AI even when we're referring to the new robotics stuff, or it can pass through to what happens on your iPhone in the hardware and the software processing. I use it to refer specifically to what's happening now to what has been called generative AI, where you can generate text and generate images, but none of that's scripted, none of that's pre-programmed. It's once again conceptualizing. It's coming up with something completely new, and that's the niche that I focus on. But you're right that it's a lot broader than that.
Yeah. So, Alan, maybe again, just to help listeners, and they'll be largely directors or chief risk officers or people working in that space where they're dealing with the risk to organisations. What sort of applications have you seen where organisations have taken this, maybe some tentative first steps? How have they applied AI and gone about trying to recognise and realise the benefit?
That's such a cool question, Anthony, because understanding the capabilities of these models is really difficult. It's a similar question to what use cases have you seen for the internet, or what use cases have you seen from bringing on an MBA? Because post 2020 AI is like having a boardroom full of MBAs working 24/7, or a boardroom full of PhDs working 24/7. So you're essentially relying on the imagination of the person putting those guys to work, which might be your CEO or your board or your CTO. And there's no prescriptive here. You can say, go and do marketing or go and do strategy. A company called CS India actually assigned ChatGPT as their CEO, so it can go and do everything from ops to enterprise to, that's a very long list of what you could do for the business. But it means that there's no prescriptive use cases. The things that I've seen range from an internal and external chatbot for very large companies where you've got multinational office locations, maybe tens of thousands of staff. You don't know what all your products do. So you go and speak with post 2020 AI, and you can have this conversation about what that product does over there in London or New York without having to bring someone else into the conversation, all the way through to writing your proposals, writing your business cases, helping developers maximize their productivity. So for coding, it's 2xing and 3xing productivity using Microsoft's GitHub's Copilot. There are infinite use cases, and it relies on humanity's imagination to be able to come up with, well, how do I want to use this? Do I want to use this to come up with daily social media posts? Do I want this to help set our business strategy? Do I want to have an office full of interns doing X, Y, and Z? It's really infinite, and that part is very exciting, because I can say, here's the things that I've used it for, and that won't even be 1% of the capabilities of having a super intelligence.
That's great, Alan. And that prompts a couple of questions. And I've just used the word I was going to ask you about, prompts. So I guess the smart use of AI, it seems, is the questions you ask or the tasks you assign it. Or is that what they're called, prompts?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. We say we give the models a prompt, also called a question, and then it provides a response, which is essentially an answer. And in 2022, 2023, there was a focus on prompting, on prompt crafting, on prompt engineering, which is essentially wording it in a way that the AI will understand. But this is becoming less important as the AI is kind of fine-tuned to us. So more and more we're able to ask plain English questions in 2023, especially focusing on, we were having to focus on spelling and grammar, getting all that right, feeding things very specifically to the AI. That's no longer happening. And so that's going to flow through all the way through to, ask it in very, very plain English, and it'll be able to answer that.
Right. Okay. No, that's great. Thank you for that clarification, because I've seen a few articles where it says, you got to be really careful about how you ask the question, or, rubbish in, rubbish out type thing. So obviously it's progressed. The second part of that, Alan, was, I guess, what would a typical project look like for an organisation? I'm not so much once you get to the point of you starting to feed and ask it things, but how does it work? I mean, do you have to set up your own instance? I presume there's more to it than just logging onto the OpenAI website and start asking questions. What does a typical AI project look like for an organisation? Do they have to set up their own instance? And what are the mechanics of getting a project set up?
Yeah, so I talk about there being maybe 3 different levels of implementation, and I use an airplane metaphor for that. So maybe you've got a Boeing 787 Dreamliner as an option, then maybe you've got a little Cessna, and you go all the way down to a little paper airplane that we used to throw around in class.
Yeah.
The Boeing 787 is a big model like GPT-4 by OpenAI, or like Google's Palm 2 model. Forget about the buzzwords. They're both massive, massive models, the equivalent of having superintelligence, of having your 1000x Einstein. They're only accessible by API. So to continue the plane metaphor, it's like leasing something from Boeing. It's only available to be leased. The 2 models that I spoke of, GPT-4 and Palm 2, you can't go and have that. And in fact, even if you could, you would probably need a few $1 billion to implement it properly. They're just enormous, I think, is the best descriptor there. That's my recommended option. And there are ways to implement that with enterprise-grade security, making sure that you're comfortable with sharing IP. Microsoft have their Azure enterprise instances where you own your data. They don't see your data. You're essentially pinging these models privately via API, and it's all very safe and secure to the extent that it can be. The next step down is to implement your own model. This would be the Cessna. So you can own it then. You're spending a lot of money on either bare metal servers or similar, and the model is maybe 5 or 10% of the size of the 787. So you've got models like T5 by Google. You've got some of the newer models like Llama that was released by Meta AI. And it enables you to have this capability, again, only a very small fraction of what's possible with the larger models, but you get to own it. You can even fine-tune it on your own data. And then we come all the way down to the paper airplanes, which are essentially little models you can put on your laptop. And it might be similar to what people have got on their iPhone when they're using predictive text to move to the next word. Makes it very simple. Again, you own it, but it does not compare with that Dreamliner. So there's a lot of options, but to me, the choice is clear. If you still get control of the data, you don't really have concerns about IP or data loss, then it makes a lot of sense to go with the 2 major models, which are GPT-4 and Palm 2. As of June 2023, that'll change by the end of the year.
Absolutely. And I guess, sorry, and it's going to sound like a dumb question, but that instance where you might have a large corporate that leases via API ChatGPT or Palm 2, their data that they're sharing is a part of the just broader data set. So when they do a prompt or ask a question, the artificial intelligence is not just considering their own data, it's considering the data broadly around on the internet. So it's considering all of the data, not just its own data set. Is that right?
The real answer to that is that all of these models, all of these AI models are pre-trained and frozen. So essentially they're locked in time. Something like GPT-4, ChatGPT, was pre-trained with data up to about the September 2021. And that means it doesn't know anything that happened after that point. So you get that frozen model, frozen in time, And then you can give it access to your company data as well. So you can give it all your PDFs and documents. You can open it up to the internet, but generally these models don't have internet access. They're conceptualizing from their brain, and you're able to kind of bolt on any extra knowledge base or documents that you need.
Ah, that's interesting. So they're not live. So the war in Ukraine doesn't exist in artificial intelligence's mind at the moment. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, that's correct. It does not have any knowledge of the fact that the Queen's gone or the current wars. Its knowledge ends in September 2021 for most of them. There's more and more work on giving it access to live data, but that's not part of the post-2020 AI technology. That technology was essentially feed it with as much information as you can, give it the equivalent of 10,000 years to train on that data, and then that black box is locked. That is a piece. That's why you can put it on your laptop, have that black box, a smaller version of that black box, and be able to ping it and have these new responses generated that are unique. Adding onto that your knowledge base, adding onto that internet access obviously makes it a lot more powerful, but the original versions of these are frozen in time.
Right. And is part of that, Alan, the discipline of making sure that the data that it learns on is, I was going to use the word good data, but I suppose data is data. But I guess there is a risk if it did open up to the internet. You know, there's some pretty hairy stuff, I guess, out there on the internet as well. So is that part of it? Is it a sort of a data quality issue around locking it down to a point in time?
That was not part of the decision. It's a technical limitation that's responsible for having that end date. Basically, they need to get data, filter it, which takes months, and then they start the training process, which also takes months. So that has forced many labs, AI labs' hands in having a particular data cutoff. Data quality is a separate conversation. It's a fascinating conversation. It essentially says maybe give it all data and then later tell it what's good and bad. Or for some AI labs, let's make sure that we're not feeding it with, in the case of ChatGPT and GPT-4, let's make sure we're not feeding it with erotica. Let's make sure we're not feeding it with terrorism-related material. And, you know, that's a particular decision. It's a very subjective decision. So once again, it's a longer conversation.
Yeah, no. Thank you. That's good. But it helps with the context of how these things come to be and what data informs them, which is great. Brett, you had a question?
Yeah, Alan, that's fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Just picking up on something you just said, subjectivity. It seems to me that everyone seems to be divided. The whole world seems to be divided on this issue. There's either let's embrace it or let's be fearful of it. You either sit in one or two camps, or perhaps the third and the biggest camp is I haven't got a clue what this thing is. So, what's your view on that? I mean, there's even been a lot of discussion about limiting it. You know, the threat to humanity and all that sort of stuff. I mean, is this just emotional argument that's put forward by people who don't understand and they're just fearful of the unknown? What's your view on that, Alan?
Once again, that's such a long conversation. I could speak about that for 24 hours, and then 8 billion people have their opinions on that. A percentage of them are informed, so it's very much a long conversation. It's going on in hallways around the world. Google brought on 200 ethicists to talk about this stuff. There are entire research centers that focus on ethics and alignment of AI with humans to make sure that it's in our best interests. It perhaps comes down to like philosophy on fear versus love. And the loudness of some of these arguments is kind of debilitating for, you know, if you sit around and actually listen to it, because you've got people screaming about, well, it's going to take over the world. And I suggest to them that perhaps they lay off watching so many movies. And it's not their fault, right? Every Hollywood movie has given us a bad impression of AI, whether it's Terminator, right the way through to the more recent movie, Ex Machina or iRobot. they're not had good look-ins to what's possible here, but it's not a realistic view of what's happening right now. Once again, I see this as a boardroom of PhDs or MBAs working 24/7 for you, conceptualizing new content. So a robot uprising is not in that scenario. It's right for people to be concerned. I think there's a particular element of society that is focused on fear-based thinking, and certainly humans are prone to negativity bias, which is basically criticize and attack for whatever reason. I don't want to go into the psychological elements of that, but for whatever reason. And so that seems to trigger in the media and the news cycle as well. It's just not a part of a black box that generates text, even though it is reasoning, even though it is better than you at wine tasting, even though it's better than our students. The data's black and white, Brad. I'm sorry.
It's actually red. There you go. It is that fear factor, though, isn't it, Alan? I mean, certainly, and I'm sure Anthony would agree with this, over the years we've seen that, unfortunately, a lot of organisations will tend to avoid what they don't understand rather than actually making a concerted effort to understand it. So that knowledge-based decision-making process sort of gets replaced by that fear of the unknown.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And this is kind of the worst time for that to show up, because the companies that are slow to adopt this technology will essentially lose completely. This is not like not being ready for the social media evolution or the internet evolution. This is the evolution of humanity. This is allowing us to amplify capability by 1,000x. I'm not just talking about IQ anymore. I'm talking about efficiency, productivity, even outside of economy. The capabilities, the extraordinary outputs of these models can't be understated. So the small business that gets on top of this has the capacity to outperform the multinational that's been running for decades.
It's a fascinating time, isn't it? So on the subject of extremely exciting, can I just ask you the question about the conference? I've had a lot of feedback from members of the risk management community about a conference you attended in Adelaide in South Australia back early in May. Unfortunately, I wasn't at the conference, but the feedback has been terrific. I think you managed to open everybody's eyes in a way that I suspect that none of them had anticipated. So can you just give us a little bit of a rundown of how you approached that conference and some of the content that you actually presented to them?
Yeah, sure. That was for Simon and the Risk Management Institute of Australasia. Great mob. I always tailor my keynotes for the audience, even if I have no idea of the subject matter, which was the case with a heavy haul rail conference I did recently in Australia. I know nothing about trains, but what I did was essentially give them a human-like avatar backed by GPT-4, speaking to them about the specific niche. And it's the same thing that I did for the RMIA, except that I've got a little bit of expertise on risk management. Besides giving them a human-like avatar to talk about everything from ISO 31000 through to the current news of the day, I also, in real time, asked this black box to generate a complete risk register. And they saw it being drawn in real time about, and I was going to ask them to suggest, but we ended up doing it for a lithium company in South Australia, and I wanted it about the HSE function. And I said, draw out the risk title, the causes, consequences, controls, risk rating with a color. And they could see it build this table for them out of the black box, conceptualizing. You could think of it as best practice. This was not a pre-existing risk register. It has been trained on a terabyte of text data that will include everything about 31,000, about bow ties, about enterprise risk management in general, about HSE, maybe the best of risk registers that are either online in web or in books because it's been trained on books data, or on Wikipedia or in journal articles. All of that stuff was part of its pre-training. But it essentially came out with a conceptualized, unique risk register about this query that even to me was exciting to see, because this black box can do anything, but when you ask it something about your niche, you know whether it's right or wrong. And I had some people come up to me afterwards saying that that was their exact niche, and they could see there that the top 10 risks that it generated were applicable to what they were doing at the same time. So just one suggestion, less than 0.0001% of its capabilities, but really interesting to see. It's kind of visceral to see it jump onto your expert, your knowledge base.
Can I add to that, perhaps a little bit scary? I've just received my redundancy grant. I mean, that's fascinating. That is absolutely fascinating. So, here's the dilemma we now face, is that we can either be threatened by this, or we can say, all right, how do we embrace this and actually work with it to improve the overall quality of the services that we're going to deliver to our clients? This sounds absolutely fascinating stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And Alan, just for clarity, was that just using ChatGPT?
It was, yeah. So anyone can go and use this. I'd encourage everyone to familiarise themselves with it. This is not some scary computer code thing. The interface is amazing. 14% of American adults have used ChatGPT. You can go and use it yourself right now for free, I believe, chat.openai.com. I was using the GPT-4 model, which is the very latest model. It is enormous. It was hugely expensive. It's very recent. It came out in March 2023. It is the largest known AI model right now. And essentially, if you haven't used this, you need to be using this to catch up, to be able to see what's possible. There's nothing stopping you from jumping into this. You don't need your IT guy. You can log in, do this for free. Don't give it any of your data, of course. Just ask it or tell it, you're an enterprise risk manager, design a risk register for me using these table headers, and away it goes. And once again, that's one of a trillion queries that you can give it, and every time it will conceptualize something different.
That's fantastic. I'm glad you actually mentioned that, Alan, because earlier today I asked ChatGPT to prepare some questions for an artificial intelligence expert that I might be talking to. So I have 12 or 13 questions here for you later on, but we'll come back to those.
I'll get GPT-4 to answer for you.
Anthony, I don't think you need to ask Alan. You're not listening. He's suggesting that we actually need to just plug it into the system.
That's right.
Exactly.
Right. So, no, it is fascinating, and I've used it a fair bit, and even just for something, Alan, which I was fascinated about. We're a relatively small niche consulting firm. And, marketing is one thing that we think about all the time, and it's, for a lot of organisations, it's a chore rather than a joy. But within about 20 minutes, I was able to do a full marketing plan for the organisation on ChatGPT, which was just unbelievable. So, yeah, there's certainly a hell of a lot of potential in using it to do things better. So the RMIA thing was a good discussion, and I mean it. I guess the limitation here, Alan, is your own thinking and your own application. So how would you advise, particularly risk managers that are listening, not a 1 to 10 step-by-step what they should do next, but what sort of advice would you give them after listening and getting all excited, I guess, today about what to do next?
Can I just jump in before you answer that, please, Alan? Just for a little bit of background and context, when I first met Alan, he was actually working for a risk management company providing risk management software application, and that software application is one that we continue to use and adopt, and we've been great supporters of it over the last 10 or 12 years, actually, since I met Alan. So the interesting thing for our listeners here is that Alan comes to AI from a very, very well-experienced position in respect to risk management. So his ability to be able to provide commentary here that's relevant to our audience is above what you would normally expect specifically. So sorry to jump in there, Alan. I hope that wasn't a little bit over the top, but I think it's very, very relevant.
All good.
Yeah, very relevant.
I appreciate it. No, still not an expert in AI. In risk management, but I did spend a number of years there and had the pleasure of working with Brett while he was at APA, and then further on down the track. So got a lot of coverage of what's happening there. If I go back to the concept of the relevance of intelligence, though, it's almost like you can still have your expertise, but you can rely on superintelligence to have completed a PhD in risk management or in whatever you want to ask it and beyond. And that part for me is fascinating. That part, again, is why I left study and practice of human intelligence. It's over. The education part's over. In some ways, the business part's over. And for now, the augmentation and amplification of job roles and of life is already here.
Yeah, that's a very big concept. That
that blows you away.
It does.
Yeah,
it does. Look, and I want to give that some context because it's an outrageous thing to go on record and say. But if you look at what's happening with models like GPT-4 that have never been told what to do, they've just been given a lump of data, and they've been given 10,000 years to make connections between that data. And they come out and they are in the top 6% for the SAT, or they're achieving 100% in the theory of mind test, which is a psych test for humans, outperforming the human average, which is only 87%. This kind of capacity is really extraordinary. It was never taught to do maths. So Watson, IBM Watson from 2011 and before that, it was taught, here's what you need to do. Here's a question and answer. Here's a fact. And here's how you respond. Post-2020 AI is not like that. It's just been given a lump and it's come out with this black box that the chief scientist calls alchemy. So I don't have any reservations with saying it's magic. So when it was not taught how to do maths, it's gone and looked at all of that data for 10,000 years, found out what a number is, found out what an operator is, found out what the equals sign is, and now you can give it, and there's an example of this in the GPT-4 paper, you can give it a physics exam in French with visuals, with diagrams. It can look at those diagrams that I would not even be able to tell you anything about, and then run the maths through for that diagram and output it in English. So I'm not understating it when I say this stuff is truly extraordinary.
Yeah, I'm a bit I'm a bit lost for words, to be honest. It's it really is a recalibration and a reset, isn't it, of your thinking around this stuff. You've really got to stop and say, hang on a minute, the rules have changed and changed dramatically.
Yes.
To that end, Alan, if a listener said, geez, this guy's convinced me, I'm signed up, I'm ready to go, what's the first step?
I think with any new technology, it's good to have a bit of theory and a bit of context. But with this technology in particular, you can jump straight into it. I mean, there was no need to go and read a manual to use Facebook or to use the iPhone or to use the web or email in general. So being hands-on with it is better than listening to me going, look at all the things it can do. Go and test it out yourself. So there's the web version of GPT-4 or ChatGPT at chat.openai.com. There's now a mobile app for that. So you can use ChatGPT, the official app by OpenAI, on your phone, on your iPhone. I actually use an app called Quora Poe by Quora, Quora. You can get to that at poe.com, Poe.com. The reason I use that above the official app is that it gives me GPT-4. It gives me a competing model called Claude and Claude Plus, which is an amazing model. It gives me 5 or 6 other models, including models that can take 75,000 word inputs or give 75,000 word outputs. Now consider that you could give it your entire risk management policy guideline procedure in however long that is. It can absorb that, and then it can either give you a summary or it can use that context to generate your risk register. outside the scope of risk management, you can say, here's the latest Harry Potter book or Game of Thrones book, go and write a film script version of that. Once again, the imagination here is the limit. But so using this ChatGPT Online, Poe.com, or the Poe mobile app, which I use, there's another one that's free, has no login at all, called Pi, P-I. The website for that is HeyPi, HeyPi.com. It's the most advanced conversational chatbot that was actually given to us by the guys that created the concept of post-2020 AI. It's another buzzword called transformer, the transformer model. But HeyPi.com allows you to have conversation with something that wants to be conversational. So ChatGPT wants to solve your problems. It wants to do code. It wants to generate risk registers and anything else that's your particular specialty, whereas HeyPi just wants to have a conversation. So go and test it out. Go and see, and it's once again my imagination, but ask it what to wear today, or what meal can I cook with these ingredients in my fridge, or any other tests that you can come up with, and actually see what it conceptualizes as the response. If you want to put it in a business context, go and ask it to write your business case for your particular business. Go and ask it to write 10 social media posts for your particular niche or your particular subject. Test it out with whatever your action item is for today, because I can guarantee that it'll give it a go, and in most cases, it will outperform a human's capability to generate that.
Yeah, this is frightening.
It's actually exciting. It's actually really exciting. I mean, I've been a little bit frightened, a little bit intimidated by all this leading up to this discussion, but I'm really now quite excited about going off and exploring and learning more about this. So you've certainly fueled my interest.
Yeah, and I think that's a given. You have to go and wade in, right? The world's not going to stop if you don't get involved, right? It's jump in and learn. Alan, I did see somewhere that there are thousands of AI interfaces. I guess people hear about ChatGPT. They may have heard of DALL-E, I think it's called. That's the sort of image and that sort of stuff. But I gather there's thousands. Are there interfaces that are specialist in particular fields that you use? I mean, or is for most people or most organisations a Chat GPT or a Palm 2, they're gonna do most of the heavy lifting for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's actually even more models than that. So in 2022, a big aggregator called Hugging Face, man, some of these terms are ridiculous, aren't they? Hugging Face, huggingface.co, showed that we had 100,000 new models released in 2022. Now, we're just about halfway through 2023, and we've already got 100,000 new models in 6 months. Each of those are either fine-tuned to a particular use case, like security or medicine or 100,000 other options, or they're just different sizes of the same family. But it absolutely, you're right, that there are both general and specific models here. The general models like Palm 2 and GPT-4, which are text models, can do anything. And then you've got specifics that might look at something that helps you out with whatever your particular subject is.
Right. Oh, that's fantastic. So, and you could go and explore those and without using names, Google search them and those sort of things, and find all the different models.
Yeah,
that's great. That is really good. And I guess this is just going to continue to evolve. People will continue to invest time and effort in developing new models. Models will get refined, all those sort of things. What's your view, Alan, on the current debate about, it's all too much, it's all going to get out of hand, it's going to, and potential for laws and restrictions placed on it? What's your thinking around all of that discussion that's going on?
One of the leaders in the field of artificial intelligence is Ray Kurzweil. now at Google, but he gave us Singularity U. He gave us the concept, or popularized the concept of the singularity, when all of this speeds up so fast that we can't even conceptualize what's happening. We can't even keep up with AI because it's going so fast. And Ray says something like, these technological advances haven't been held up for 1 second because of debates on ethics or debates on, I feel scared about that. And it's like a stream where we're just running around these rocks. So these rocks are not going to stop anything. If there's an AI pause, China keeps going, Russia keeps going. This is not just Silicon Valley. So I think that any kind of hesitation or reluctance on a government or company or individual's part is really just slowing themselves down, and other people are going to leapfrog what's actually happening. I've mentioned this a couple of times already in this discussion, but it's almost like the internet revolution, just on steroids. So an exponentially greater advance than the web. And of course, you can hold out on using the web. You can stay on your fax machines and use your pager. And, you'd be where some of the companies that were around in the 90s and aren't anymore actually are today, which is in the scrap heap. Same for mobile phone. I took a long time to adopt the iPhone. It was not something that I wanted to carry around in my pocket. I didn't want a large screen. But consider how useful that is, even without the apps. It's even more extreme with the concept of amplified intelligence, augmented intelligence, artificial intelligence that you can carry around with you, and you can have access to an entire building full of PhDs that are ready to do your bidding 24/7. And that's not just for writing business cases or proposals. It could be for answering your emails. It could be for a trillion other use cases, and it's up to you how you want to apply that.
Yeah. Alan, is there a risk with all of this intelligence in our pocket, as it were, that it impacts human intelligence? Are we dumbing down humans because we often hear, and you'll say, well, back in my day,
I love that.
we had to go and look up that information in the Funk and Wagnalls, right?
Exactly.
But today, kids, it doesn't matter how old you are, you can go and get the information straight away. Is it having a detrimental impact, do you think, on human intelligence?
Yeah, that's a really big question, and I don't like to look too far out. I certainly don't like to make predictions, but I'm sure that this will both augment our intelligence, and then maybe biological intelligence becomes vestigial. I'm not sure what we'll actually see there, but because there's no need for us to have, put it this way, I used to do some research, and I've got a few articles on Elon Musk's school in California, which was designed for gifted children, those in the top 1%. Elon and his principal decided not to teach foreign languages. They also decided not to rely on handwriting. There was also no music program. Now, those guys were looking pretty far out, and for good reason. So children born today are going to be working in, say, 2050. They're going to be retiring all the way out 2080, 2090. There's no way that what we're teaching them today is going to have any relevance at all to what's going on in 2080, 2090. The concept of boosting our biological intelligence through AI is already happening in many ways. Here in Australia, in Sydney and Melbourne, we've got brain-machine interfaces fitted to people through the synchron stentrode, which is a brain-computer interface that allows them to, with thought, write Twitter posts or write WhatsApp messages. You can go and have a look on YouTube for that happening. There's a lot of work happening in both the hardware side and the artificial intelligence side to get us to a place where we have this augmentation. So to ask a question like what's going to happen with our biological intelligence, I don't know, but it might be compared to the iPhone, or it might be compared to, there's probably a better analogy, but the iPhone is probably a good enough example for right now. We can get around without one, but when was the last time you were without it for a day or a week?
Yeah.
And didn't
It's a
freak
really,
out.
yeah, that's right. It's a really good point, Alan, and I guess we're seeing it in a microcosm now with something like the iPhone. So you can travel abroad and you can communicate with the locals via a translate capability. So I guess at some point in the future, if there are these brain interfaces, well, the phone's probably redundant and you're going to be able to understand whatever the language is. You don't need to be taught it. So I guess that's can be where it's heading. All right, that was a deep and meaningful question. I'll get back to something a little bit more practical. What impact or otherwise might quantum computing have in this space? Is it a requisite technology? Is it something that's just going to help accelerate? Is it nothing to do with it?
Yeah, I don't have an extraordinary amount of informedness about quantum computing. I work with a guy called James Weaver at IBM, who's a quantum computing specialist and advocate. I don't understand enough about it to give you a rundown of it. I've certainly seen a little bit of how it could be applied to artificial intelligence, but my focus at the moment is just on classical computing, which is enormous amounts of graphics cards or GPUs and these transformer models running on that and still being quite creative in what's possible. I think there are people that could speak to quantum computing a lot better than I could.
Yeah, no, and I was curious because I did see in your last memo an announcement about a NVIDIA DGX-GH200 AI supercomputer. Right? So obviously not a quantum computer, but an application of existing technologies. And it sounds like things are fine on the platforms we've got now. So I was just curious whether the promises of quantum computing, which I think are not just vague promises, it's coming. Make any difference to this stuff as well. So, yeah, I guess we'll wait and see what happens in that space.
Yeah, it's a big question as well. The NVIDIA one that you're referencing is the reason that they are hitting the $1 trillion market cap with only a handful of other players. NVIDIA's chips are the basis of pretty much all major models. I mean, Google has their own chips, but NVIDIA runs the world in a way where models like ChatGPT and GPT-4 are using millions or billions of dollars worth of NVIDIA hardware without even touching on quantum. So I'll be interested to see where quantum goes, and having a discussion recently with Dr. Rupert Sheldrake in London about determinism versus creativity via quantum computing. It's interesting, but I don't think it's something that's happening in a huge way quite yet.
Right. Okay. No, that's good. Thank you for the context. Back to your 14-question test that ChatGPT made for you this morning. No. I was very impressed, I must say, Alan, when I did ask some questions, and I did ask some questions around, risk management and what it could do in that space. And you're right, it's very impressive. But I was equally impressed by the fact that at the end of each answer, it said words to the effect of course, these suggestions, answers, whatever, should be reviewed and should have some human oversight, or you should consider this aspect or whatever else. So there was it wasn't a disclaimer type thing. It wasn't, do this at your own risk, but it was more, hey, listen, here's the suggestions, but make sure you consider and apply a commercial lens. I mean, even at the end of this one, right? Remember to tailor these questions based on your specific context and the expertise of the AI expert you are interviewing. So it's quite awareness is probably the wrong word to describe it, but it was a nice finish to each answer to say, hey, put this in the context of which it's given. So I thought that was really good.
Yeah, look, the black box that we've spoken about, that pre-trained frozen black box of superintelligence, is so raw that the AI labs have had to put some safety and protection on top of it, like guardrails in a bowling alley, the little safety lanes that you can put up. If you've got access to the raw model, like the original GPT-3 model, it's incredibly powerful. ChatGPT in some ways is hamstrung by these guardrails. So the little clause down the bottom that you've just read is, for want of a better term, human aligned or in kind of human generated. They've had to put these safety and protection pieces on top of it. And sometimes it makes the models less usable, less useful, because, and you'll see this, because sometimes it says, as an AI language model, I can't give this response, or there's safety layers that won't allow it to talk about particular topics. I think that the human element that we've put on there, and I won't bring out any more buzzwords, I promise, Anthony, is its downfall. That when we can get to the place where we can remove humans to help fine-tune these models and help put safety layers on these models and actually allow AI to tune AI, we're going to be in a better place. But right now, and this is the cut and dry facts, we're relying on teams of people in Africa who are being paid less than $1 a day to rate in multiple choice particular outputs from ChatGPT, and then it gets retuned on their preferences. Now you can see how that might not be the best way to align a black box, but that's what's happening. So it's great to have these warnings and to have models that seem like they're giving you some verbosity or some human understanding. But I think the way that they've gone about it, the way that the AI labs have gone about it, is not the best way.
How far away do you think that is, Alan? That stage where AI trains AI is this imminent? Is it going to be something that's going to be a legislative type process and discussion and allowed, or is it just something that's going to happen and it's coming regardless? So is that something that people are working on today, for instance, and will happen soon, or is the capacity there for it to happen today?
Yeah, it's worthwhile talking about this exponential pace of change. So I've just filmed for ABC Catalyst in Queensland with Professor Jeremy Howard. He's got a chart that basically says human development pretty much horizontal, maybe a slight uptick, and then exponential, and it's vertical. It's this vertical line where the progress is so outrageous that we can't imagine it. I'm talking about 5,000 or 6,000 AI papers released every month. So calculate that down to the minute, and it gives you some feeling for what's going on. The lab called OpenAI in Silicon Valley is, a few hundred people. When they released that model called GPT-3, a few of those people broke out from that company and formed another company called Anthropic. Anthropic are already using AI tuned by AI. So this stuff's already happening. And again, everything we've spoken about today in June 2023 will be superseded in the next few days, weeks, months. Certainly by the end of the year, ChatGPT will not be on the radar compared to whatever's coming next. It's moving that quickly.
I went to a conference last year and a futurist spoke as the keynote, and he said, the pace of change that you've just come through, all that exhaustion, the speed, the trying to keep up and that sort of stuff, he said, I've got news for you. That's the slowest it will ever be in your lifetime.
Yeah, it's true. And we can't keep up with this as humans. I write these editions of the memo that you mentioned that governments rely on. Some of these big corporate enterprises that should have their own internal comms also rely on it. Google, Microsoft, Meta, these big guys, because they can't see what's going on parallel to them. It's almost like my job to make this visible. And it's becoming impossible for me as a human being to be able to aggregate and give my context or give my opinion on, the top few things that have happened in the month, because the top few things these days might be 100 plus, and very soon will be 1,000 plus. And, then you miss the middle of that pile, which also maybe a couple of years ago would have been the top 10 things in that list. So it's extraordinary to the state where I can't keep up with it. No human can keep up with what's actually happening. And once again, we'll be relying on AI to be able to help us out with that.
Yeah. No, that's a great answer. Alan, it's been remiss of me to mention your website as well, so lifearchitect.ai, where you can see some absolutely amazing things. As I said earlier this morning, I was showing my wife your discussion with an AI, and she was a very attractive-looking AI and looked almost human, but she wrote a book in the process, which is quite amazing. But I will add to your comment, Alan, and the tip to get out and just start using this stuff, it maybe is have a look at your Memo, because it is so hard to keep across everything that's happening in this space. And I've got it in front of me at the moment actually, and all of the things you've just mentioned about, the GPT app on iOS, and 58% of US adults have heard of ChatGPT, 14% have tried it. So just a great little snapshot of what's going on. I love the article about the self-driving cars too. So yeah, there's a stack of stuff there. None of us are equipped to handle all of this stuff. Drinking from the fire hose was the old saying about trying to get all this information. So the Memo is a great spot to be able to keep up with that. So I'll make sure in the show notes for this podcast I put all those links, because I think that's a great way for the listeners just to start to get their head around this. It's coming. And it requires a bit of a mindset. So I think something like that would be excellent to do. Fantastic. I'm just about exhausted for questions. I'm not going to put you through ChatGPT's set of questions, although it was an interesting exercise. Brett, have you got anything else you'd like to ask Alan?
No, absolutely amazed. Actually quite excited to get out there and really try and get a deeper understanding of what this all is, but also really thinking a lot about how do we actually exploit this and use it to go forward.
Absolutely. And look, that's a fantastic mindset, Brett. In my keynotes, I've tried to tone down what's actually happening, because some of the responses are, this is terrifying. This is so confronting that my brain's shutting down. And, I don't want to understate what's happening, because this stuff is happening. And if you're behind, then you're literally behind. So I love the fact that you want to jump in there. On the lifearchitect.ai website there, Anthony, to your point, as much concise and succinct summaries as I could come up with. So there are papers that, again, go out to the UN or go out to Google that summarize the latest models. There's annotated versions of the papers for things like GPT-4. There's even the most comprehensive look at the data sets used to train these AI models. That's my paper called What's in My AI, that even shows you the top websites and domains used to train. No one else had gone and dug that up, but I was fascinated by the concept of what's in there? What did we use ISO 31000? Did you use my risk register that the PDF there is searchable by Google? And the answer to both of those cases is probably yes. But you can go and check for yourself, and also just, again, have a look at how I've split that out and how that actually looks when it's behind a model like ChatGPT.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. It's a absolutely fantastic resource, and I'd commend the listeners to go and have a look at the website. Look at some of the papers. They're not a hard read. I think that's one thing, Alan, you're to be congratulated on. It's not tech speak. It's even I could understand it, so I'd say most of our listeners will be pretty safe. Well, Alan, thank you so much. We've been blessed to have you on the program. It's been absolutely fascinating. I think Brett will never drink a bottle of red wine again. He's just devastated that. I can see him pouring out bottles down in the sink just as we speak. So. It's been a bad day for Brett's wine consumption, but a fantastic day for.
I'm actually looking forward to lots of discussion with the chat AI in some way where we can actually compare notes about the wines that I'm drinking. So I'm sure I can learn a lot from that experience.
I'd love to hear your feedback on that, whether it's the heypi.com guy or ChatGPT. There's another one that's quite useful called character.ai, where you can ask for a particular role. So in character.ai, there's a psychologist version, there's probably a wine taster version, there might be a risk manager version, and it's another rigorous and reputable platform that was developed by some of the guys that actually gave us this technology. So it pays to be careful on which particular platforms you're using, but there's 3 or 4 examples of the good ones, and they are the best test of it, I think, is to give it your particular subject and see what connections it makes.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion.
Awesome.
Excellent. All right. Alan, thank you so much again. Wonderful to talk to you and pick your brains like this. I'm sure we could talk for days about this subject, and we probably will go away and think, why didn't we ask him these questions as well? But it's been absolutely fascinating. So thank you for that.
Awesome. Thanks to you and Brett. It's fantastic to have questions that are very specific about risk management, which is still something I'm very much interested in. And like I said, it's very visible. It's something that you can go and test because you know what a good risk register looks like. You know what that how that should look. And to be able to see an artificial intelligence generate something unique and test it with something unique, I used, what would happen if a UFO landed here on the Adelaide Oval, or, something ridiculous and absurd like that, just to see how it designs its preventing and mitigating controls, or how it actually rates the consequence and likelihood, is fascinating. Something that would normally have taken me 8 hours to facilitate in a room full of engineers, and you know about this as well, Brett, is done in a matter of seconds. That's really cool to see.
It's both exciting and scary.
Yep.
Yes.
Well, it's game changing, and nobody should have to put up with a room full of engineers. Sorry, that's a little dig at our other partner, who's a chemical engineer.
Nice.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Alan, and listeners. I hope you really enjoyed that as much as we did. That was an absolutely fascinating conversation. You heard here how the world is changing. You need to jump on board and change with it, or it will run you over, basically. So jump on board with this stuff, experiment. We'd love to hear your stories about this. So if you've had some experience in the AI space that you'd like to share, let us know. If you had any ideas for further discussion around this space, let us know. We love the fact that you tune in regularly, and look forward to you tuning in again next time. So for this one, we'll sign off for now. I'm Anthony Wilson with Brett Palmer, and you've been listening to Dr. Alan Thompson, and we've been talking AI. Thanks for tuning in. We will see you again soon. Cheers.